Hello, all. This will be the concluding video for introducing our channel. Um, the aspect that tries to get people to appreciate that martial arts are a holistic endeavor with an incredible potential that is, in these times, untapped due to this focus on one very specific aspect of these arts. We've been deconstructing these ideas that people have about what constitutes a system, teaching, and technique. And I've put out information, my point of view basically, on those three aspects. This will kind of tie up this introduction and give some thoughts on how they all work together so that when we start training, there'll be some understanding about our approach, how things are done. Okay? So, with that said, you hear a lot of teachers, people who practice, talk about the value and the exploitation of technique. How there's good technique, bad technique. This art works, this art doesn't work. It's ignorant, okay? You fight the way that you are trained. If you train in classical ballet and you train in a ring, kicking each other in the head for 2 or 3 hours a day with ballet technique, and then I put you up against people who practice boxing, who don't spar, okay? Don't have any contact and just hit things hypothetically like the bag, like what they would do if somebody were to engage them. Who do you think would have that advantage in a fighting scenario? Think about it. Now, that's not to say that there are not better and worse approaches to how things are done. That's a true statement too. Obviously, the ballet is not really designed for that, and it's a little bit silly to state otherwise, okay? However, keep something in mind. All these arts that people talk about, they came about and were used at some point for fighting, okay? That includes Tai Chi, okay? That includes Wing Chun, that includes Aikido, okay? Aikido happens to be an art that is excellent if you're a bouncer. As I've said before, I bounced for many years, okay? And you'd be hard-pressed to find a better art to deal with taking people out of the club, okay? Being able to work with the way force is coming at you when you are bouncing at a bar, okay? Where initially, at least, you really don't want to get into an altercation. You have to have a certain passivity. You have to be well trained enough to give that advantage to your opponent, or in this case, drunk patrons, okay? In other words, if I'm with my wife and kids and I see a threat, I'm fully justified under certain circumstances in taking the initiative and not waiting until I'm at a disadvantage. We can argue that point on specifics or logistics, but I'm talking about a threat. You know, somebody who's legitimately a threat, who it's pretty well established as a threat. And am I supposed to wait for them to hit me? No, okay? But if I work in a professional capacity, I can't do that if I think a patron might be dangerous, okay? I have to have a little bit more restraint. Aikido works for that. It's one of the designing principles of the art, is that, you know, you're supposed to deal with the other person's attacking energy. Okay? So, again, I'll repeat that statement. All these arts that we talk about at one time were used in combat for circumstances. Okay? No more examples are necessary. Suffice to say, you can find somebody like Wing Chun teachers who must have not got the memo about Wing Chun not being an effective fighting art if you watch how they're training and what they're doing. So, with that being said, we have these corpus of techniques that are generally how we define an art, um, which is wrong right off the bat. You should define an art by the training, okay? Just like you don't look at somebody's rank in a martial art. Look at how long they've been training in the art, okay? When I was coming up, it took me like about 12 to 14 years to get my Nidan in my first style of Shorin Ryu karate, okay? 14 years. There are people who have 10th dans in 6 years now. Ridiculous, by the way. I'm sorry. A little bit of an opinion on my part, but nevertheless, okay? How long have you been training in this art is the question. How do you train in this art? Or any art is the question. What is your procedures? If I train for 500 years, okay, I get reincarnated to the next person, but I do things really badly. Does it matter how long I train? That sort of nullifies that, doesn't it? Okay? So understand the relevant points of view. So the same can be said for technique, okay? And this is where we get into a situation where most people seem to be blissfully ignorant, okay? Techniques come out of proper habits, proper movement dynamics, and understanding how to apply force and leverage. Those are the factors, okay? The technique is a way of expressing them. So, when you look at somebody's technique, you really want to understand how they're applying those things more than the actual technique. If you are fighting, okay, and you're trying to think about using a technique, you're not doing martial arts. You can do that. You can be very effective. You can be very strong and be very threatening. You can be a wrestler, for example, in a high school scenario where you're competing, where somebody who's anticipating your opponent's movements in a very restricted environment, and that's part of martial arts and fighting. However, the thing to be aware of is when you're doing martial arts, your technique should be responsive, and it should be done with muscle memory so that by the time you're thinking and anticipating and trying to set your opponent up, you've done your technique. It's happened, and now you are the tail end of that. Okay? And the reason for that is in a self-defense scenario, there's no time to set up. There's no time to get position first, like in sports jiu-jitsu, for example. Gain position to gain the technical advantage. Okay? It doesn't work that way. All right? Somebody is attacking you because they have a perceived advantage, and your chance to respond is, if it's not instinctive, it won't happen. Okay? I tell people to look. I have mixed feelings about this. Unless you are serious and you've been training for a while, don't look at these things where people are killed with knives, for example, because you might want to understand something, because it's a horrible thing that you're watching, okay? Somebody like me, with 40 years experience, being in combat-related activities for a good portion of my life, I look at those things. I look at them so I can share them. And if somebody is studying, I suggest the same thing, along with understanding, having some, I don't know how to put this, but it's not for your amusement that you're watching, okay? But notice how fast those attacks occur. They do not occur in a way where you can set up a technique, because your body has to know how to respond if you're going to survive those attacks. And this is the art of self-protection. Okay? This is the aspect of martial arts that has to imbibe the rest of any system because that's what martial arts is, okay? Other things are beautiful and wonderful, okay? An oarsman, okay, in Venice or any river is not less of a vehicle driver than a truck driver because his boat doesn't have a motor, okay? And what I mean by that is whatever art or thing that you practice, if you, as a younger man, you need to mix it up, do some MMA, do something where you're fighting. That's an aspect of martial arts. It's not better or worse, okay? But it's a different thing, okay? And martial arts is not ultimately about that, okay? You want to go into that aspect of martial arts and as a lifelong pursuit, God bless you, okay? I'm 60 years old. I'll be 61 in the middle of this month, okay? Let me tell you something. As a 61-year-old man, no matter how good I am, if I put myself in that situation per se, any 20-year-old has a lot of advantages over me at this point because they're younger and stronger. And that's not going to get you very far if that's your focus. I mean, some people remain very healthy and spry. They can do more than others, okay? But martial arts, as a development, as an activity that will evolve you, okay, in all aspects of your life, okay, has to involve understanding how to protect yourself at all times, okay? All times. When you necessarily can't mix it up in a ring anymore as well, all right? How to use weapons. Very good example of that. So, with that said, when you look at technique, and this is very important, you can alter technique, you can change technique, you can use another technique, okay? There is no right or wrong technique. As long as your foundational elements that you're using are what you're supposed to be using, okay, you should be training yourself to make adjustments and not rely on a technique, okay? I see a lot of this. Okay, the guy choked me. I'm going to come put this arm through, come over here, come over this way. Now he's trapped, and I'm going to drop. First of all, it's never going to work like that in a situation. People choke at different angles and do different things. However, if you understand why that works, okay? If you're grabbing to choke me and I've trapped you now and I turn or I drop, that's the principle of leverage. When you choke here, okay? If I raise my arm, I lock your hand and I protect my neck. It's a very common principle in the arts. Once I can do that, now I have some control over what I do with you, okay? That's the thing that should be focused on. We're talking about choking and moving in such a way where you're using your shoulder, your neck, and your body movement to trap, okay? Also, you're not going to trap somebody's hand under those circumstances unless you do it in a way that's subtle, where they do not know that you're trying to trap their hand. So, a lot of these things you have to practice with good habits and not rely on technique, but rely on principle. And unfortunately, one of the offshoots of that is martial arts ceases to be what the Chinese used to call performance, or it was, I forget the name. It was something along the lines of saying, carnival martial arts, okay? You see these very elaborate displays. The person hits me and I do 3 strikes, and you have to abandon that at a certain point because ultimately you're standing still and trying to hit somebody. You ever see anybody actually smack somebody 20 times, both standing still after somebody threw a blow or grabbed them? Think about it. If they're successful, they hit them 1 or 2 times, okay? I'll give you an example of that. Like, we used to, when I was growing up for a portion of my life in Baltimore, I saw a conflict once where some karate guy got grabbed and he went into a very strong kind of a technique. What he wound up doing was, by going back this way, he broke the guy's arm, okay? So he didn't hit the guy 10 times like, he was anticipating 1, 2, 3, takedowns. He hit the guy and he broke his arm. I had a friend of a friend who knew a guy who studied Aikijitsu, and he was attacked, and he broke the guy's arm at the shoulder. And the guy in the practitioner was very upset because the technique was supposed to break the shoulder and the elbow. All right. So what you're going to find is the application of successful technique. Okay, it doesn't happen in sequence the way most people think. The way you get that sequential devastation is through understanding how somebody really moves in a fight or flight situation under attack and duress. And then you can hit multiply and successfully, okay? But people move differently, okay? When people are boxing or fighting for social dominance of some sort or another, it's a different way the body responds to stress than if somebody's fighting for their life, for example, or is under an extreme stress of a different sort, okay? When you're attacked at a certain point, you're acting biologically. And the real beauty and incredible skill of martial arts is when you can take that reaction and tailor it so it's more effective, okay? You can work through, this vortex where your eye is suddenly focused and time slows down and you're seeing the most immediate threats. Your body's moving so that you're making big movements, okay? You're hardly thinking about threading a needle, okay? When, somebody is attacking you and you're threatened, really threatened, okay? Your body gets into big mode, okay? It moves in big ways so it can generate power, so it can protect itself. That's biological. So martial arts adds to that. It makes that much more effective. Some of these arts that people love now, it's become very fashionable to, to joke about. A lot of martial artists, they tease women, and they also tease some of these arts like the Bujinkan. Now look, I trained the Bujinkan for many years, probably about 14 or 15. I have my criticisms about the arts. I'm not a member any longer for many reasons along those lines. But there are some very, very good material in those arts. And there are some people who practice it, who utilize it at the highest levels, okay, of where these things are necessary. And the reason for that is, again, it comes from, whether you think it's a direct transmission or not, I'm not going to get into all that. I don't, but it's not important. But Koryu in general, or arts of that fashion, it looks like they're training a certain way because it's very basic, or that it's sort of lost the vigor and the intensity, or it's like a dead art, like a reconstruction, but that's not true. And to Hatsumi's credit, by the way, and to other teachers who have taken up the mantle of the Gendai arts, giving life to those techniques, you can actually see how they work, okay? But they move, what seems basic is just patterning your body and understanding how you move under stress. If I'm really going to attack you with a weapon, what your reaction will be if you're not trained versus your response if you are trained, okay? Angles, perfect example. A lot of stuff in Japanese older arts it's very linear. You first have to learn distance, okay? Distance occurs in a straight line at first. Then, once you understand that, you can foreshorten it with angles, with taisabaki, okay? If you're in front of me and I know I'm one punch away from you, okay? Now, once I understand that principle, I can move offline. So when this comes here, okay, I'm just moving offline. I might take an angle up here. I might take an angle with my whole body, okay? But in order to first understand that, you have to understand distance. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. This is a 20-minute video, and hopefully we'll be able to get started with some physical, technical videos soon. I'm looking for somebody I can throw around. We moved recently. Peace.